Chapter 16. A few years later. The years passed by. Kaoru was still the same height, standing at 157 centimeters tall. She was 158 centimeters when she was 22, so this didn't really come as a shock. Kaoru had thought she was already this tall when she was this age back on Earth, but was a bit crestfallen to find out that it was all in her head. If 157 centimeters made her look like a 12-year-old in this world, then 158 centimeters was probably the average for 13-year-olds. It could barely be called a change at all. Kaoru was only thinking of the average height of people in Japan when she asked Celeste for her new body, so she only had herself to blame for that. The people around her already realized that this was about as far as she was going to grow. But Kaoru still held out hope, telling herself that Westerners all loved smaller girls and also making sure to shove the word lolicon deep into the corners of her mind. Alago used the designs Kaoru had given them to create a whole new breed of ship, establishing a new sea route to the undiscovered treasure island of resources to the west of them. They'd focused their efforts into their trade route along the coast, and they were making steady progress into establishing themselves as a maritime nation. The design Kaoru had offered them was a model ship she'd created using her potional powers, as usual. It was one of the earlier versions of wooden vessels meant for exploring the open seas. For some reason, the goddess figurehead the Empire attached to their boats looked younger than Celestine. The faces they had were definitely cute, but the look they had in their eyes could only be described as harsh. The clergymen of Rueda had lost their standing as leaders of the country, and the vast personal fortunes they'd built up over the years was seized by the newly established government. After managing to bring the country relatively under control, they sent a proposal to Belmore asking to be annexed into the kingdom, to which Belmore accepted. They were allowed to be governed by their own citizens rather than Belmore's aristocracy, and were treated as an extra territory of the kingdom. Maybe they'd proposed annexation because they wanted to guarantee the future of their small country after losing their status as the chosen people. Or maybe they wanted to be a citizen of the same country as Kaoru, since she was a being on the same level as a goddess. Either way, Belmore wasn't going to question their decision. Even if Acide didn't stand a chance compared to Alago, the new island was about the same distance away for them as it was for Belmore, so they began focusing their efforts on shipbuilding as well. Not one to take this lying down, Belmore threw their hat into the ring too. They became Acide's rival as both raced against each other for seafaring superiority. Roland came asking for Kaoru's help, but she refused to give anything outside of what she already had for both countries. It wouldn't keep things interesting if she did, after all. Speaking of Roland, he'd become engaged to none other than Francette, the protector of the goddess. She was the recipient of a divine blade and became a heroine who saved the country, so there were no qualms about the difference in their social statuses. There was no one who could oppose who royalty was allowed to marry or not. On the contrary, the entire country welcomed the idea. After the proposal, Francette had come before Kaoru to swear undying loyalty to her. While Roland seemed like he was getting up in his years now, Francette didn't seem to have changed a bit. Kaoru felt like she'd get told to look in a mirror if she tried bringing it up with Francette, so she'd never tell Francette that though. Brancott was beating themselves up over letting a huge catch like her get away. They'd learned that a girl with the power to create potions had appeared at one point in the territory of Baron Rooney. Without a doubt that girl had to be the friend of the goddess herself, Elpha Kaoru Nagase. Though both sisters were inside Brancott at one point, they'd slipped through their fingers after being driven away by other people's greed and, frankly, stupid decisions. Just thinking about it, she had to have traveled through half the peninsula to reach Belmore, which meant she'd pass through Brancott on her way there. There was a good chance she'd have settled down there. In fact, the members of the Hunters Guild in Baron Rooney's territory even said the girl was planning to do so at one point. If the incident at the restaurant she worked at in the capital didn't come to pass, she might have stayed there for good. It was something those on the Brancott side would regret for the rest of their days, and the same went for the countries on the continent as well. Balmore wasn't only the production location for the miraculous healing potions but whose development as a country had exploded in recent years. The other countries wanted the girl responsible for spurring that growth and who created the potions. The one who is said to have the same powers as the goddess Celestine herself, but they wouldn't dare try and do anything rash. Alago had faced a crushing defeat trying to do just that, while the once influential leaders of Rueda had fallen from power. Not to mention the words goddess Celestine had spoken that day. If you see anyone else doing something bad, just do whatever you need to take care of it. Who knew what sort of punishment constituted whatever by a goddess's standards? But one thing was for sure. No one wanted to find out for themselves. They were hoping, however, to invite the girl over at least once for some advice on what to do to further develop their own country. As for Balmore, while they may have been a step behind Alago when it came to shipbuilding, they were still putting up a good fight. They'd already built smaller prototype versions of ships for traversing the open sea and were currently working on the construction of their first large-scale version of the same type of ship. They'd also begun introducing crop rotation and the use of fertilizer as part of their farming techniques. It was just about time for the first cycle of crops to be finished from the test fields, and the results were more than clear enough to officially incorporate this strategy into their agriculture. As well, Fearsome Fran and the other 4 Grim Reapers served as Roland's personal guard. The group who'd protected the country together were all hailed as heroes. Roland included. They were a group of 6 warriors who'd caused more than 40,000 of the Alago Empire's troops to flee in fear. There was no one who could hope to stand a chance against the 5 knights who'd received the blessing of a goddess. Though the 4 former Imperial Guards had made sure to return the swords they were granted back to Kaoru. It wasn't like they were true vibroblades or anything, but just normal swords that happened to be extra sharp and much sturdier, though they were definitely on another level than your average blade. Roland's sword, on the other hand, did have the high-frequency vibration function, so Kaoru actually had to make sure to take the sword back from him. She wasn't planning on letting anyone but her Einherjar Francette have one like that. It looked like he had no intention of giving it back to Kaoru, so she had it stashed away using her item box's storage function. Roland didn't take it well. There was plenty of complaining on his part after Kaoru had confiscated the sword, something along the lines of, "Why was I the only one who didn't get a sword? It's not fair." Kaoru was forced to explain how royalty receiving a sacred sword was actually an incredibly big deal. And it wouldn't only cause Balmore's relations with other countries to get worse, but it might even make King Surge seem even less relevant. Roland finally seemed to settle down after she told him there was a good possibility people would start calling for him to take the throne instead. Even after the lecture, he immediately assigned the 4 Imperial Guards who received sacred blades to work under him as his personal guard, alongside Francette. Did he really want a sword that badly? It was the first time she'd seen the usually calm and collected Roland throw a tantrum like this. A grin crossed her face, as if it actually came as a bit of a relief that she knew even someone like him could act like this as well. Kaoru had quit her job at the Mellard workshop after the peace talks wrapped up. After everything that happened, she had much more on her plate to deal with now that made it harder to work at a small workshop like theirs. Tears in their eyes, everyone begged her not to go, but her hands were tied. She had already prepared a replacement, however. Lola, an 11-year-old when she took over, who happened to be a member of the Eyes of the Goddess. She'd always looked after the other children in the group and had a certain motherly personality to her. Kaoru assumed she would be the perfect girl to take care of the 5 adult-sized children at the workshop, and it turned out her intuition was right on the money. The cuisine back when the kids lived in the rundown house was downright awful because they lacked the proper ingredients and seasonings to make anything decent for themselves. Now that Lola had proper cookware and everything she would ever need, she had plenty of chances to let her cooking skills shine. Cooking duties for the Eyes of the Goddess had been handed down to Lucy, another girl from the group Lola had trained up herself. All the girls who were small and frail due to malnutrition back then had grown up to be lovely young women as well. Then there was Emil, the leader of the Eyes of the Goddess. He and Belle, the girl who threw herself into the well before, were getting along quite well these days. There was only a 4-year gap between them, so he wasn't a lolicon or anything. News of the battle at the well had spread across the country, and figures made in her image were placed near wells after she became known for protecting them from any evil. She became so popular that offers to adopt her started to come in from all over, and some good ones at that. But Elle had refused them all, choosing to stay with everyone else instead. She never talked about why she did that though. Kaoru could only offer a wry smile knowing that the girl who had worked so hard to throw poison into the well became known as a protector of them. Cedric, the oldest son of the Lyodard household, had gotten married. His fiancée was the aristocrat girl Kaoru had spoken to back during the courting ceremony. Kaoru was overjoyed to hear that and would come over to visit her every once in a while. She acted much sweeter now compared to their first meeting. Ashale seemed to have given up on Kaoru and now had his sights set on Lolit instead, which had earned him Kaoru's great displeasure. "Are you fine with any girl as long as they can cook for you?" Business was booming with the Abili Trade Company. The potion trade was still doing great, of course, but the other new products Kaoru had suggested were a huge hit as well. This was due to her reputation practically guaranteeing they would sell. Now that everything had finally calmed down somewhat, Kaoru had realized something. "I don't have any potential husband material." And just like that, Kaoru suddenly found herself panicking. "I'm already halfway through my marriageable years, but I don't have a boyfriend or even someone I would want to go out with." "Alright, what single guys do I know right now?" King Surge. Pass. Ashale. Have fun getting along with Lola, damn it. There's Hector, the boy from the Earl's household who Francette used to work for. He was 13 when I first met him, but he's grown up into a fine young man since then. I'll put him on hold for now. Alan Back and Brancott, but things might get hairy if I marry someone from another country now, so I'll pass. The prince over there is pretty annoying, too. Who else? Is that it? That's all I got. Even if I played along with the idea of going with Hector, he's the successor to the household of an earl, and he's younger than me, too. Oh crap. Am I screwed? I was a bit shaken up over the predicament I found myself in. As I absent-mindedly staggered through the town in a daze, a middle-aged man suddenly jumped in front of me, a dagger in his hand. "It's your fault. It's your fault the Holy Land was destroyed. We lost everything. It all happened so suddenly I didn't have the chance to react." The man rushed forward, his blade finding its mark as it plunged directly into my chest.